Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. Before we begin our webinar today, I must tell you that this presentation you're viewing has been prepared by and is the property of the Middle States Commission on Higher Education, and it may not be reproduced or distributed without prior permission from the Commission. For today's webinar, we will be overviewing self-study to smart study, using AI to strengthen accreditation activities. Throughout this webinar, as you hear things from our presenters, you may have questions. And if you do, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to submit those questions, and we'll do our best to answer them at the end of the webinar. Good afternoon again. My name is Tiffany Lee, and I serve as the Vice President for Research at the Middle States Commission on Higher Education. One of our co-presenters, Laura Coutier, is a partner at SOVA. Laura brings more than 20 years of post-secondary experience to her work and has a keen understanding of the power of policy and advocacy for transformation, as well as the hard work needed on the ground to advance institutional change. As a partner at SOVA, she is deeply engaged in both policy and implementation work for some of the most promising areas of reform, including guided pathways, developmental education redesign, and transfer and learning mobility. Our other presenter today is Zachary Pardos, Associate Professor of Education at the University of California, Berkeley. Zachary is the Associate Professor and is studying adaptive learning in AI. His work in higher education, designing human-AI collaborations to pave pathways to and between systems of higher education, has been published in venues such as Computers in Education, NeurIPS, the Internet in Higher Education and Science. At UC Berkeley, he directs the Computational Approaches to Human Learning Research Lab, teaches data mining in the Data Science undergraduate program, and is an affiliate faculty in cognitive science. For today's webinar, we'll begin by doing an overview of the Commission's artificial intelligence policy and procedures. We'll then hear about the latest research findings on the use of AI and credit mobility, and then also learn more about Attain. And we'll close out by engaging in some Q&A with our presenters with questions that you may submit. Beginning with the overview of the use of artificial intelligence in policy and procedures. The purpose of these policy and procedures is to ensure that our institutions are using AI tools ethically, transparently, and securely, and to make sure that institutions are in compliance with the Commission's policies, federal and state laws. An overview of the statement of policy requires that institutions as well as Commission representatives, again, use AI in a transparent, lawful, and stakeholder-conscious manner, and to ensure that any usage of AI protects confidentiality, security, and privacy of the data that is being collected, and that our institutions are intentional about making sure that you have institution-specific data governance policies that also integrate AI into your frameworks of your institution-specific policies. Our statement of policy also does an overview of making sure that institutions and Commission representatives comply with our disclosure requirements under applicable laws, and also ensure that any usage of AI aligns with the Commission's accreditation standards, requirements of affiliation, and regulations, federal regulations. Some general principles that institutions and Commission representatives should keep in mind is that when you engage in any use of artificial intelligence, it should be lawful, ethical, transparent, and secure, and that institutions shouldn't put any type of sensitive or privileged data into any AI tool that is not secure, and that it is the institution's responsibility to make sure that all information that it is presenting or submitting is accurate and also coming from a place of integrity and does not plagiarize. So if you use AI-generated content, it is your responsibility to review it to ensure that it is accurate. Additionally, we should keep in mind that these tools should be used to support human decision, not replace it. And that institutions should also be sure to align with the Commission's acceptable use of technology, policy, and procedures. Thinking specifically about our procedures for artificial intelligence use, institutions need to think about their governance structure that they have and security structure that they have at their institutions. And if you're wanting to engage in the use of artificial intelligence, make sure that your policies and procedures and frameworks offer room for you to be able to integrate protection for AI in that as well. These policies or frameworks that you have at your institution should be sure to address lawful, safe, and secure use of AI, transparency, accountability, and how your institution will be monitoring its use, how this use could possibly impact your students, faculty, instruction, and other institutional stakeholders, that it also protects academic integrity and plagiarism safeguards. You should also be sure to make sure you're documenting your processes as far as the procurement and vetting of any of these AI tools, especially for those using sensitive information, and that your institution is engaged in ongoing monitoring and evaluation to ensure that it does discontinue anything that ultimately it finds is non-compliant. And the institution should be intentional about providing AI literacy training for staff and faculty at the institution before its implementation. Procedures also ask that institutions and commission representatives only use secure tools when using AI for accreditation materials. And again, making sure that your materials are accurate, readable, and in English, and disclose the use of AI in submissions. So if the institution is using artificial intelligence for any of its content, it is the expectation that it will disclose that it has used artificial intelligence as part of a report or any activity that it's engaged in. Lastly, we also expect that commission representatives will maintain confidentiality as well as review and correct any AI generated content before it is submitted. So overall, some general key takeaways related to the Commission's artificial intelligence policy and procedures is that institutions have governance in place, that the frameworks and infrastructure that's developed lends to transparency and accountability, protection of academic integrity, includes procurement and vetting of information and tools, includes some monitor and evaluation of the tools that the institution is using, training and literacy for institutional stakeholders, and constant review to ensure confidentiality and security at the institution related to AI, using the use of AI tools. That concludes my overview of the Commission's artificial intelligence policy, use of artificial intelligence policy and procedures. At this time, I'm going to transition to our second presenter, Zach, where he'll share a bit more about his research in AI.
Thanks, Tiffany. And thank you for having me here to talk to you about share the research about credit mobility and AI. It's a real pleasure to talk to this audience, which I hear is lots of different stakeholders and positions. So looking forward to the Q&A and follow up. So Zach, I teach at Berkeley, but have been conducting AI in education research since 2007, if you could believe it, starting with mastery learning tools, adaptive learning tools, like computer tutoring systems. And when I arrived at Berkeley in 2013, started a lab that ended up focusing more on AI in higher education. And that was thanks to a couple of NSF grants that we applied for and were awarded in 2015 to apply what was then called deep learning. Is anyone old enough to remember that phrase, deep learning? That's what ChatGPT became. But the technologies basically that would end up constituting the chatbots we use today, but apply those basic um, earlier models to data from higher education. And it involved prototyping of different algorithms for different use cases, as well as trying to field some at least um, you know, beta testing type of platform that students or other stakeholders would interact with. So not just the offline model experimentation, but also can you build something that might be useful out of it? And that was the beginning of that work. My lab also continues to do work on open source mastery learning tools, which maybe will have an integration in the future with the story of transfer and articulation, but today focusing on the research around transfer and articulation. I won't spend too much time here. When I say AI in the title, I'm referring to neural networks. But AI has been back from when I started using AI in 2007, using Bayesian networks at the time, and that was called AI. It's really anything that pushes the boundary between the tasks that computers are good at and the tasks that only humans are good at. And that has been an accurate description. And neural networks today, large language models, which are based on neural networks, is what's doing that, is what's pushing that boundary. And so that is what is currently AI. So I want to show you one of the first pieces of research that we did applying AI to higher ed data. And this is a data set from my institution of course enrollments. So some student semester course courses are the rows. So who enrolled in what between fall 2008 and fall 2016. So this was about 100,000 undergrads enrolling in 2.2 million courses. And what we wanted to do is feed this enrollment data to the AI. In this case, it was a natural language AI, the way most of the popular AI that we interact with are. And it was given to the AI the way you would give a sentence to an AI. But instead of a sequence of words, it's a sequence of course tokens. So that's how it was presented to the AI. And then we wanted to do more than have it predict. And at this point, it's not a natural language interaction yet. What we wanted to do is we wanted to look under the hood and see after giving the neural network all of this information about enrollments, how does it conceive of students and their majors? What majors are similar to one another, et cetera. And so we did that. We used some tools that let you pop the hood of the AI and see what its brain looks like. And every data point in this plot is a student. It's a student at Berkeley right before they graduate. And it's the positionality of the student is based on the courses they took while at the institution. So we're not talking about transfer yet. This is mostly new freshmen from year one to year four. And so what the AI has positioned students based on is this coursework. So psychology students and cognitive science students, as you can see here, are close to one another because they had similar coursework. And if we arbitrarily look over to the left, we see some STEM majors. Applied math is interspersed with letters and sciences, computer science is also interspersed with statistics, which is adjacent to economics. So, an interesting view of how the AI views majors with respect to one another. And that work partially kicked off what might be considered a subfield. Colleagues and I had a kind of position paper in science called From Pipelines to Pathways in the Study of Academic Progress. And this is really the question of, well, what kind of an academic field studies this kind of thing with computational technology? Is this a AI computer science subfield? AI and computer science hasn't generally focused on education as a domain. Is this education data science? Is it something interdisciplinary like learning analytics? And I say it's higher education administration research, but using data science methodology. So that was what we can, that was a taste, a tease of what we learn about students and their majors from AI based on AI's view of the data. What can we learn about courses from those same data? And so when we fed the same data to AI, but now we want to look at the data points being the courses rather than the students, this is what we saw. And so these are all the courses taught at the institution. Um, there's this sort of colored by the division, which is just one level of abstraction above a department. Uh, and you see there's this natural bisection where to the left is mostly STEM majors, to the right, social sciences and humanities for the most part. And if we zoom in, we see some interesting adjacencies. Economics is in between statistics and business courses. Chemistry is next to MCB, which is next to integrative biology. So integrative biology, not talking about, you could talk about plants, environmental science, policy and management, geography, and then city and regional planning. So I couldn't have told you how chemistry relates to city and regional planning at this institution, but it's interesting that the AI view of the university does tell a story that is quite plausible. And we did several validations of the AI's model. We asked it what courses does it think are most similar to one another, and what we had as the ground as ground truth data is faculty designations of what courses have credit restrictions with one another, where you can't take both and get credit for both of them because they're so similar to one another. So we had some ground truth data to sort of quiz the model in addition to this more exploratory analysis. So, what can the model tell us about the course beyond what the catalog can tell us? And again, this is pre ChatGPT. This is 2020, in which this paper was published. And what you see here are different queries we gave to the model. Uh, this is a predecessor to the ChatGPT kind of model, so you can't talk to it in natural language. It's much more constrained, but you can query it in different ways. You can say, um, what is the difference between advanced econometrics and econometrics? You could imagine a student has this question of, well, should I take course A or B? They're pretty similar. What's the difference between the two? And of course, you can look at the catalog description and try to figure that out there. The problem at Berkeley is that these two courses actually have a very similar catalog description. Um, and the AI model gives the following answer. It says that the course that is the difference between advanced econ and econ. Basically, what does advanced econ have that regular econ doesn't have? It says it's linear algebra, the course linear algebra. Um, and that ends up being true when talking to the instructors of advanced econometrics. You can also ask the model in a different way to come up with keywords that it believes Econ 141, which is advanced econ, has that 140 doesn't, and vector comes up, which is part of linear algebra. What is interesting about this is vector doesn't appear in the catalog description of Econ 141. It's this latent but true description of the course that was inferred because of the enrollment data. So there's sort of this multimodal view. You hear about multimodal LLMs, ChatGPT and other Claude, et cetera. You can upload an image or soon or now some models of video and also text. And so it has multiple modes of data that it can take in to try to answer your question. This is a very early version of that, where we're giving it enrollment data as well as catalog descriptions, and it's able to sort of what's called interpolate. It's able to figure out what might be behind a course using data other than just the catalog description. So, as maybe you can imagine, I didn't at the time, but in hindsight, this ability to understand what a course is really about, even if there's some ambiguity in its catalog description, could be a very valuable uh, improvement in capability in order to help facilitate equivalency decisions, cross-campus equivalency decisions, which are articulations. So why study this area? I probably don't have to tell you, but why did I. One of the reasons is 70% of articulation experts say excessive workload is a major challenge in their transfer evaluation work. I talked with several articulation officers starting at my institution um, who uh, describe their process, and we've since done research on this. Manual review often leads to inconsistency and lack of fairness due to different interpretations of credit acceptance norms. And of course, creating transfer agreements, guided pathways, course-to-course articulations, et cetera, very costly endeavor because of how manual a process it has been. And so the technical applicability is you can take two different AI representations of two different institutions. Here's a community college that has fewer courses and a university, and you can use AI to find connections between the two, much like AI is used to find translations between the vocabulary of two different languages. And this analogy between using machine learning for language translation and using it for essentially course institution to institution translation um, enables AI to be used in the articulation process. So that's one use case. And in 2019, we reported about a 70% accuracy predicting between community college and UC existing articulations. We're now up to over 90% using a much larger data set, all of the State University of New York institutions, or 54 of them anyway. And we've pre-printed that research. And so we're to push on the research side to use different modes of data, including how much can you utilize existing articulation networks to predict missing articulations. So not even looking at enrollments, not looking at course catalog data, only looking at that structure. Can you use that to try to infer what's missing from that structure? Similar to how social networks, Facebook, etc., use these kinds of algorithms or LinkedIn to suggest who you might want to be connected to. In some cases, some algorithms just use that network structure itself to try to predict where there might be missing links. And we also conduct research on the human-computer interaction aspect, right? So as Laura will pick up on, technology itself, and as especially leadership who might be at this meeting know, you can't just be handed a piece of software and that's going to make you successful. You make you successful. Your community, your group, your set of partners, your team makes use of something successful. Um, but we need to make sure at least that we identify the possible ways in which AI could be actually decrease efficiencies and make sure that we're not doing that. And there's something called AI aversion, and we followed the literature to make sure we're not doing the things that increase aversion, meaning if you're recommended something and it's from an AI, maybe you're less likely to adopt it. That's constantly changing though in society, but we're also looking out for not just the algorithmic aspect, but that things are usable um, and make sense to people. Okay, so can this technology be used in practice? Um, we created a research version of a tool based on these algorithms to do research, and now we're trying to scale it up so that it's more robust and covers more practical use cases of institutions. So here's an example. The tool is called of a tool called CourseWise, based on this research. So here, let's say I'm a transcript evaluation I'm doing transcript evaluation of a transfer student in admissions, and I'm at Berkeley, and the student is coming from Los Angeles City College, and linear algebra was on their transcript. So I load that up, gives the description of linear algebra at Los Angeles City College. It also says which other of my peers already accept this course as credit. So if I don't already, there's some kind of peer signal, others do. And then what I see is any existing equivalencies at my institution, if it's a many to one or a one to one. And then I also see AI suggestions. Um, in the system, it never does something automatically. There's always human oversight. But I can look into this. In this case, it's linear algebra for data science, a new course. So even though this is probably, I mean, well, this is an existing match. When new courses come out, you may want to consider if they also should be considered. Or maybe they satisfy a gen ed requirement, even if there's not a course to course match. And so the system is just trying to find all reasonable ways to consider recognizing that learning. To make that process a little bit more streamlined when evaluating a transfer student, we have a transcript evaluation built into the tool. This again was also based on published research about using different off-the-shelf and LLM tools to do OCR on a transcript. I'm aware there's a lot of vendors in this area, but we put out some public domain research on the accuracy of doing this and doing it in certain ways. And this can parse the transcript and then for every course do an AI evaluation and also comparison to existing rules. Uh, the lab also works on metrics. So there's a limited way in which the field has been able to describe how good your articulations are, how good a system's articulations are, how good institutions are. And so we worked with SUNY and other institutions and using different data sets on a metric called the articulation coverage score. And so this basically says how close are you to a reasonable saturation point with your sending schools? If you're a 4 year institution, if you're a 2 year institution, says, what's your coverage score in terms of how well do receiving schools accept your credit? But it uses AI to have a reasonable ceiling, so that instead of it counting carpentry against that score, if the 4 year doesn't have a carpentry department, it only considers the courses that are plausible to be articulated. And you can see how that changes year to year, um, among other stats. And I won't go into the math now because I want to hand it over in just a couple slides here. The second use case, besides credit evaluation for transfer students, is actual transfer student planning. Can AI be used to assist in this process of transfer students considering what institution to transfer to, what program to transfer to, how their courses might transfer, um, what major to select? We did a study on using ChatGPT uh, to suggest majors to students, but this was early on, so we didn't actually want to give the suggestion to the student. We gave it to advisors on campus and asked the advisors to rate the quality of those recommendations as a kind of first step before maybe showing students. So here's what a planner could look like and what's in development. Should be um, being beta tested in a couple months. From a student's point of view, you're at Laney College. You have said you want to go to d pursue Chem Eng at Berkeley. You're 45% of the way there in terms of meeting requirements. This is what you've completed. This is what we suggest you take in your last semester at Laney. And here's how the minimum transfer requirements are being met for your destination school. So this is still in beta, but it is being tested. So future horizons, credit for prior learning, right? It's not just about the equivalencies of the courses you've taken when you come into a new institution. It's also about, do you have a professional certificate of some sort? Do you have a military training certificate? What about common course numbering? Establish Maybe you've demonstrated mastery learning in learning objectives relevant to courses that should be taken into account. So these are all future directions that the research lab is exploring um, to try to more fully acknowledge credit. And we're so encouraged by uh, CRAC's encouragement to use AI to boost credit transfer process. That's one less worry an institution perhaps has to have about should we start exploring this, and also gives, I think, Laura and I um, optimism that there's an opening here for reform. And with that, I'll turn it over to her.
Great. Thank you so much to both Zach and Tiffany. So, hi, everybody. I'm Laura Couturier, and I'm going to share my slides here. Okay. We've talked, you've heard from Zach about this incredible research that he's done. Oh, sorry, they're advancing on their own. So what I'm going to talk about now is how are we seeing some institutions in the field respond to this research and seek to use the technology platform CourseWise that Zach and his team have created. So first I'll just talk, and Zach presented some research. I'll present a little bit different research about, what are we responding to in the field here? Historically, we've known that about a third of students in higher ed transfer at some point. But we haven't really understood the full impact of transfer of credit as a nation. Last year in 2025, Public Agenda did a public opinion poll of sort of the average adult American. It was a representative sample by a number of characteristics such as race and ethnicity, age, and income. And in that public opinion poll, we learned some really exciting new information. One of which is that the prevalence of the transfer of credit is much higher than we'd previously understood. So we learned that approximately 4 in 10 adult Americans have tried to transfer some form of credit to receive a post-secondary credential. That's inclusive of credit from dual enrollment in high school, of credits from prior learning, from military experience. But we also learned some pretty upsetting things from the same public opinion poll. Of those Americans who tried to transfer credit, 58% reported losing credit in that process. And they reported a number of very negative consequences for themselves, ranging from running through eligibility for financial aid, having to repeat courses. Perhaps most disturbing is that 16% who tried to transfer credit reported leaving higher ed altogether because they found the process so difficult. And then relatedly, we also learned in this study that 74% of those who have tried to transfer credit agree that colleges care more about money than they do about students. Things for us to think about in the current age, which leads me to this next slide, which is we believe that the impact of transfer of credit is incredibly meaningful for learners and workers, but it's also, a real challenge for you all in institutions every day. It is a very hard world out here right now, and there are so many pressures coming at you. And transfer of credit is one way that, if we can make improvements in transfer of credit, we can address really big things like this narrative about declining public trust in American higher education, things like declining enrollments. So there's a lot of good in here, both for learners and for institutions. So responding to these conditions in the field, a group of partners came together. The American Association of Community Colleges was the lead convener. They called together a group that includes the Association of Public and Land Grant Universities, APLU, as a 4-year partner. Zach and his teams at Berkeley at the Computational Approaches to Human Learning Research Lab and at the organization Equivalent Systems that has established CourseWise as a software platform. And then my organization, SOVA, we participate as the project manager and as the transfer expertise. We spend a lot of time on the ground working with institutions on transfer and learning mobility. So this group came together and established ATTAIN. ATTAIN is an acronym standing for the AI Transfer and Articulation Infrastructure Network. And ATTAIN is, I like to refer to it as the human side of change. It is the technical assistance, the community, the tools, and a social network supporting institutions who would like to use the CourseWise software platform. What are we trying to do? So Zach touched on this, so I'll go through this quickly. But for institutions that are in the Attain network, they're benefiting from a number of things. One is through the CourseWise software platform and the AI that Zach has already talked about. They have the opportunity to dramatically increase the number of equivalencies that they can offer to their students. So as Zach already described, the software platform looks at courses and says, hey, UT Austin, you currently accept these 12 courses from Austin Community College. Did you know that another community college in your region is offering essentially the same courses? You should consider them for equivalency. And then that is there for human review. And people can decide, okay, I'd like to accept that equivalency. And through that, the hope is that we can really get to more degree applicable credit for students so that they are getting more credit and an ROI for the learning that they've done. In addition to that AI-informed feature, as Zach talked about, there are additional features in the CourseWise software platform. One that I'm particularly excited about is because I spend so much time with institutions on this, we see that a lot of institutions are doing both articulation and credit evaluation processes through email often, right? And maybe sticky notes on people's monitors. And so we're really hopeful that by bringing all of this together into one platform with a strong workflow, we can deliver a number of benefits that, if it's in the platform, people can see the history of requests made. They don't have to toggle back and forth with email. Nudges can be automated. They can see if they got an answer or not. They can look at, what's happening here between relationships and institutional partnerships. So there's a lot of really exciting aspects to having all of this within a platform. And I'm really excited too about the metrics that Zach mentioned. Do want to note that all of the development work that Zach and his team do is through a commitment to open data and open standards. And so, I like to say our team, because we're in institutions every day, we are banging our heads against the lack of interoperability on the ground all the time. And we see how hard that is for people in the institutions. So we are committed to not being a part of that problem and being part of the solution by making sure that all of these tools are interoperable. As an example, we already have an established partnership with Credential Engine and have mapped our data to their open data language called the Credential Transparency Data Language, CTDL. And last but not least is the social network. And we're really proud of the work going on in the social network. APLU and AACC are the real thought leaders on that social network. As these membership organizations, they're leading their institutions through conversations about how do we not allow technology to just replicate existing challenging policies and practices, but instead to really help us dramatically change how this looks, both for students and for institutions. So there's a set of knowledge communities, technical assistance, cross-site learning opportunities that are available to institutions to really push the envelope on what does this look like now and how can we dramatically improve it. So just a quick note on sort of benefits to institutions. We really believe that this should reduce credit loss for students and improve student outcomes, and relatedly improve many of the metrics that you all are held accountable for in terms of enrollment and completion. Reduce the workload currently that people are struggling with for articulation on the front end and credit evaluation on the back end. And hopefully address that declining public trust. If we can really ensure that more Americans really feel like they got an ROI for the time spent in post-secondary education, then we can really help to boost public confidence in institutions. A quick note on what does this work look like now? We have onboarded our first cohort of institutions. We have 57 institutions in cohort 1. We have institutions from 16 states plus Guam and the Northern Marianas Islands. And so that group of institutions is running with us right now on what it looks like to use the platform. But we are excited to announce that we're also moving next into a state-focused framework for supporting institutions and onboarding them. And so we will be expanding in the short run to 6 states. California and Texas are 2 of the states, and then 4 of the states are still to be determined. With great thanks to a number of funders, including the House Junior Fund, Educate Texas, and Ascendium Education Philanthropy. We will be moving to a model here where we work with state intermediaries on which could look like a SHIO office or a system office, on supporting their institutions with things like cleaning their data and being able to submit data for the CourseWise software platform, bringing those institutions together into a learning community, advancing any types of state changes that would support institutions. How do we ingest existing data assets so that institutions don't have to do all the work? So some states already have databases of equivalencies or databases of Common Course numbering systems. And so the goal here would be, how can we help those existing state assets to have enhanced functionality while helping their institutions to have quicker and easier access to the data that they would need to participate in CourseWise. And then lastly, that social network piece around really bringing people together to learn from each other, to help us improve the software, and to lead a national discussion about what this should all look like. Okay, so that's really it for my comments for now. So we're going to move to Q&A. There is a QR code if anybody wants to learn more. We have an email, attain@sova.org. We'd love to hear from you. And I'm going to drop my slides and turn back to Tiffany.
Thank you so much to both Laura and Zach for the information that you gave. So I'll jump into some Q&A that we have. So the first question I have for both of you, from your perspective, given your role in this process, what should institutions consider when trying to decide whether or not to participate in this type of service? Laura, would you like to respond first?
For sure. So I think, there are a number of things for institutions to consider. One is, what are you doing now, right? And how hard is that work? And in what ways would the institution benefit from really streamlining the process? Another would be taking a good hard look at transfer student data. So there's first and foremost, being student-centered about that. How can we better serve the people that are moving between work and learning and traditional institutions of higher education and dual enrollment in high school? How can we make sure that they're getting credit for the hard learning that they have done? But also there's a piece of this, for institutions that are facing enrollment challenges, and we know that's many institutions now. How can you think about really being able to increase your transfer enrollments? So we see, for example, a big phenomenon called transfer melt, right? Where students say that they intend to transfer, they might even apply to transfer, they don't actually transfer in the end. So would, getting back to them faster, getting them their credit reports in their hands faster, giving them more degree applicable credit, help to really turn them from applicants into enrollees. And this is a big issue, Tiffany. We work with one institution that can remain nameless, but on their website is posted that students should assume that they will wait 24 weeks to receive their credit evaluation report. And that is a capacity issue for that institution, but it is an unacceptable circumstance for those students. 24 weeks means they lose out on an entire semester's worth of opportunities. And so really improving on that can help, I think, institutions to enroll more students. I'll turn to Zach now. Zach, anything you want to add to that question?
Um, I mean, in institutions, if you're a receiving institution and you want to decrease time to degree, the planner feature, even though it's designed for the more complex case of transfer planning. It continues to work when the student arrives at the institution and also works for a new freshman um, at an institution. But I'll stop there.
Yeah.
Thank you both. So part of your responses aligns with another question that we received, thinking about an institution from a staffing perspective. If they were to engage in this software, what kind of work would be eliminated for that institution to help streamline the transfer mobility? And in follow up to that, what kind of new work would show up to replace anything that could be eliminated with streamlining?
Well, maybe I'll start and just add, right now I'm not seeing work being eliminated. I'm seeing those 20 weeks or whatever that was decreasing, right? The same people, but able to um, do things faster. Uh, One of the things that survey showed of what work is most taxing in the articulation or credit evaluation process, and one is the search for finding matches. In some cases, the search is because there isn't a existing data store of on the books articulations, right? It's a kind of, oh, I need to go to this department, ask them for their Excel spreadsheet, look at that because the student's coming in with X, Y, Z. So just a central place for those. And a lot of technologies can do this, can centralize those articulations. But where this goes, I think using this algorithmic technology goes further is to address the workload of, well, what if you don't just want to improve your acknowledgement of existing agreements, but you actually want to look for opportunities to expand those agreements, right? And so, right there during the process, one of the things that articulation officers and the evaluation staff said takes time is actually find if they want to do that, if they want to respond to a petition, right, that a student has, or they just want to be proactive in seeing if the course could count as something at their institution, there is a searching through the catalog that has to happen. So this could decrease that um, workload as well.
Thank you. Thinking about the decreasing of workload that you mentioned and how it could be a proactive tool for identifying equivalencies across institutions, another question we received is, what can the user do or institution do if the platform proposes an equivalency that they disagree with? Do they just reject it? Is there a process in place that they could follow? Is it on the institution to figure that out?
It's a great question. So uh, we have feedback mechanisms where you can flag a recommendation as poor, because the idea is that the algorithm improves over time, both from a base set of, let's say you uploaded the articulations that you already honor, it learns from that, right? To kind of understand what the calibration has been, at least historically, of your institution. But then we are collecting flagged poor recommendations and working on the right back end opportunity to then revise the algorithm. So right now we're at the data collection phase. We're collecting any flags, and then we'll be acting on them. But we're also being careful. We're revising some of the language that's used in the system. We used to use the word recommended, and that's in part from a kind of computer science recommender systems field. But we now reserve recommended to the algorithms high confidence, that this is the right way to go. We don't use that word anymore if it's just sort of, you may want to consider this. But there are no decisions that the system makes for you. You have to confirm everything. So if you don't like a recommendation, you could just ignore it or ignore it and flag it.
Thank you. And so, given the work that both of you have done with different institutions, what are some challenges that you've become aware of that institutions may have experienced thus far? Laura, would you like to start?
Sure. Yeah, I think from my perspective, the challenges are falling into two buckets at the moment. Um, And I think both of them are solvable. The first is that institutions have to submit their data to CourseWise. Right now, we're asking for articulations data and course catalog data. For many institutions, this is quite simple, and they have easy access to it. But for some institutions, it does require some work on the front end to clean that data or collect that data. We are working on ways to help institutions to streamline that process, and to really make it a non-issue for them. But that is, just to be perfectly frank, one of the challenges we see. And then the other is that we're really looking to ramp up our support right now for helping institutions to really use the software platform and embed it into their workflows. And so, like any technology platform, and Zach kind of led with this, in fact, earlier, it's like there needs to be a moment where people have the opportunity to sort of pause what is already an overwhelming workload for most people every single day, right? And say, okay, how can this new tool help me? And how do I think about doing things a little bit differently? And so we're really excited. We're bringing on amping up our resources in that space right now to have more of that kind of human touch of working with people directly on what did you do before, how would you like to do it differently, and what would that look like via the platform. So those are a few of my thoughts. Zach, what would you add?
I I I think that's good.
Wonderful. So, building on some of the challenges that you mentioned and just thinking about some of the nuances of the program, another question we received is, up until this point, have you thought about the competency-based education programs as part of your metrics?
Yeah, I think competent. We've looked at it. I think it's on the map in terms of how to interoperate and exchange information about maybe competencies a student is coming in with. Is there kind of some central frameworks for this? Are there, I think talk of a kind of student record store, right, has been buzzing around for a long time, but maybe there's not yet a kind of centralized calcification of that. So do we have to help and should we be part of the solution in building helping build standards around that, working with folks like Acro? Um, should we be part of that data store for, because I think if I understand competency-based education, the question, it's similar to what if a student demonstrates mastery on a certain learning objective or competency outside of a accredited institution, how can that be taken in? But I guess outside of that, looking into that, we haven't advanced that. And I think I have more to learn about that subject as well.
Thank
If I
you.
may, Tiffany, do you mind if I just, I think I'll just say that, all of the partners recognize that in the year 2026, people are getting high quality skills in a variety of venues, right? And so we're really, like Zach said, these things are on the roadmap. And we are starting with traditional courses and traditional institutions, but really intend to be very intentional about being inclusive of credit for prior learning, of competencies, of dual enrollment in high school, and all of the variety of ways that people learn. But we're still building.
Yeah. And we do have a CPL, a credit for prior learning pilot, that R&D project that's been going on. And I say have been working with ACE um, on understanding their data, maybe being among their first beta group of recipients of their data set, at least what they're allowed to release. And it's a priority of mine to get ACE certificates in there as a selectable element, not on a transcript, but that a student is coming in with, and then say, okay, what can this ACE mapped certificate map to at your institution? I think we're 5 months away from that.
Thank you for the insight. I think that aligns great with another question we received regarding what kind of work have you done up until this point to standardize equivalencies that might directly come from the joint service transcript through ACE.
Yeah, I think
Uh,
that pretty much covers. Sorry, go ahead, Zach.
you know, I think we're continuing conversations with them. I would need to look into the JST. Uh, it's a I think it's military in nature. So yeah, we're moving towards that.
Thank you. Another question we received is if an institution engages in the ATTAIN program and for whatever reason is no longer engaged, do they lose any historical decisions or institutional knowledge as part of the separation?
At least when it comes to the articulations that they've approved, you can download those at your pleasure at any time, and there is no license, associated with that. It's Creative Commons for you to do. It's your data. So we try to do that wherever possible. Sometimes it's the kind of cherry on top of a feature we've developed. And so it sometimes comes a month after we go live with that feature, but it is something we're committed to. And right now in the articulation management, you can pick the view of your articulations. Maybe you only want to see the ones that you accept from a certain school, and you can download them to CSV. If there's other types of institutional history that's desired, I'd love to hear about that. Would you want a record of not just the articulations that were approved, but who approved who approved it, what the process was to approve it? I mean, do you want to see that level of granularity? Um, Very responsive to giving institutions their data back.
Thank you. So we got a lot of questions about the product. I also want to acknowledge the questions we got for the commission from a policy and procedures perspective. And so I'll just read a few and make sure that I respond as well. One of the questions we got was asking for an example of AI generated content. While this service and tools that are being described specifically in this webinar focus on transfer mobility in general, from a commission perspective, if you are inputting and receiving an output that is using artificial intelligence that is considered AI generated content, and it really is the responsibility of the institution to make sure that it is one, a secure tool, and that it is also that the information that is being developed or generated is accurate. So hopefully that responds to that question. Another question we got around AI was, what if the AI makes a mistake? And I'll just reiterate from a commission policy and procedures perspective that it is, again, the responsibility of the institution to vet the information that's generated by any tool that is using, and ultimately that artificial intelligence should be used to help the institution make decisions, not replace the decision-making process. However, if that question was related to the tool that has been described today, I'll want to give an opportunity for Laura and Zach as well to respond. The second part of the question was, what if a student takes more credits from a bad AI advice? Hopefully they're not just using AI advice, but also engaging in institutional representatives who can help them make that decision. But I also want to allow our presenters to respond if the AI makes a mistake from their tool perspective. If you have any comments.
Zach, I think that's probably for you.
Yeah. I mean, I think that depends on your institution's policy, right, for the use of AI tools. Um, I just looked at a draft policy that says, an AI tool can't be an employee, even when we get to agentic AI, and what that means and the implications that there's an employee who's responsible for the use of the tool. That's at least the policy I've seen of an institution. Um, what I think there is a case where it could be a matter of responsibility, or what do you do in a situation if, for example, what we've proposed could be a potential in the future is Nothing right now is done automatic, and we're not planning to push in that direction, except for maybe out of state students. We've heard from some institutions that say they have pretty good articulation agreements within their system, within their state, but when it comes to out of state students, which is perhaps a transfer enrollment that they want to increase, they're having a hard time keeping up, with covering the suggested equivalencies from all those different institutions students are coming from to apply. So you could imagine a place in which, if you're confident enough in the algorithm, you could turn it on for those prospective out-of-state students, and the evaluation of the AI is what gets honored, right? After faculty and staff audit that and say, yes, we can go live with that, and it only pertains to out-of-state students. In that case, if a student comes and they transfer and they say, I have this course, the system said I get credit for it, there is perhaps a responsibility to honor that, but then faculty and staff could say turn it off for the next year, right? If they end up looking at it and they don't like it. There was another question I saw that's related to that, which is, are we doing anything to track if the courses that were recommended and accepted for articulation through the AI, if the student ends up being successful at the receiving school with respect to that course? So, for example, if you got credit for Calc 1 from your sending institution because the algorithm recommended it, does the student then go on to do well in a post-requisite of the course? Let's say Calc 2 was a post-requisite. Are we doing anything to track that? At the moment, no, but that is in the roadmap of things to analyze, to be able to make those inferences and to look over the data and say, well, where can we adjust the recommendations that were made? And not just for AI recommended articulations, right? How many institutions do that for the human established articulations, look 2, 3 years later and say, well, how successful was that? And I think maybe the reason they don't do it is because they're usually very, very, very conservative. They don't try to take on the course that, maybe is only 60% overlap. But if there were these accountability measures and analyses that take place that say, okay, 2 years later, you wanted a review of that course that you accepted, but you said it's only borderline. So, okay, now we're giving you that report. Um, I've been very interested in doing that. I've proposed that to funders before, haven't gotten that funded, but want to keep pushing on that direction.
May I add one quick thing here, Tiffany? Um, this relates to me to something we're hearing about in the field a lot, which is it's very common for institutions to give a student a preliminary credit evaluation. And then the student makes decisions about admissions, housing, registration based on that. But the institutions sometimes undo that. And that might be because of human error in what was given to the student in the preliminary credit evaluation. So there is a history of error there long before AI was introduced. But one of the things we're hearing some institutions do is implement a policy that if the institution does tell a student that a course is going to give them degree applicable credit through a preliminary evaluation, that they can't undo it for that student. So that decision holds for the student because they're making very consequential decisions about their trajectory, right, based on that information. And so I'm a big fan. That's I think, a relatively new policy. We're only hearing about it in small handfuls. But I think it's a really important thing to think about is if we communicate a yes to a student and they decide uh, big things like housing and financial aid based on that yes, that should stick. Even if you undo it for as a policy for other students in the future.
Thank you both for those responses. So just thinking about some of the decision-making process that goes into it. If an institution is interested in engaging, what level of data preparation is required from an institution perspective for them to be prepared to participate in this type of service?
Yeah. Zach, do you want to take that? You want me to?
I'll get us started. So the base requirements to get enrolled with the service that does course articulation storing, articulation recommendation, and student transcript evaluation is catalog descriptions, and articulation records. Um, the Some institutions have articulation records kind of distributed, like in that spreadsheet form, and that can take a while, and real campus leadership to call that together. Um, that's a bigger lift, but it is possible. We did that with partners before, but we did have some philanthropic funding to help concatenate all those disparate sets. Um, there are existing information systems that store articulation data. You have to be mindful of whatever your agreement might be in terms of pro proprietary agreements with those systems, but they often have data in uh, the format or similar format to what we need. So I think it's a relatively low bar. Um, if you have particular sending schools that you want to be able to evaluate transcripts from, it's best if they can also join the pilot with you. As Laura alluded to, we have funding that will allow us to go into several new states, and we haven't chosen those states yet. So if you think your state or your system might be interested, please email SOVA about that so we can include you in the mix. But if your favorite sending institution or a sending institution isn't part of the network already, we are aggressively looking for ways of still enabling that sending institution's credit to be acknowledged by the system, but it isn't today.
Thank you for that. So we have another question that was submitted from one of our attendees that's at a SUNY institution, and they're asking about the work that you've done or may still be doing with the transfer navigator.
Yeah, so um, at my Berkeley lab, we've been working with SUNY for since 2021, 2021. And they've been part of three different Gates Foundation grants with us. So they're just about a day one type user. So good to see another SUNY folk. What have we been doing with them? So that paper on how well do different algorithmic approaches to predicting articulations work, that was all SUNY data that the preprint is out there for. At the American Educational Research Association, we had a session at their annual conference on using the Transfer Navigator with um, Hostos and Lehman, I believe, were the pair, and what the experience of that was ingesting degree requirements, showing, ingesting a kind of sample student history from a sending school, and then showing the AI's recommended path to transfer advisors at both schools and getting feedback on that. So the future interaction with SUNY for that, I would direct you to Thomas Hanford at SUNY System Center office for the latest on that. But yeah, the collaboration has been great. I know there's a lot of things on SUNY's and all institutions' plate in terms of programs and initiatives and so forth. And I think if you're excited in seeing this be among their priorities, I would talk to Thomas Hanford about that.
Thank you so much. Another question that we received was, can this platform produce evidence showing how a specific decision or recommendation was made? And if so, what type of documentation would it provide?
So if we have a ability for us, there's an ability for us school to request an articulation. So we could say sending school to request from a particular receiving school that they articulate one of their courses. In order to deny that request, well, I guess in order to formally deny the request, they have to include a reason, which is sort of the bare minimum that there should be out there. Um, Although I understand it's easier to click a button, not have to type something. In terms of other documentation of reasons, yeah, there's log data, but yeah, I would like to know more about the level of explanation or review that would be desired. There's certainly a history that can be looked at what articulations have been added and who was part of that process. We have a whole workflow where right now the administrator has to kind of go through that workflow process themselves offline before clicking the articulate button. But our version 2 of that is to internalize all that flow, right? If this needs a faculty eyes, specify the faculty member, they'll be emailed and shown the relevant information, be asked if they have any questions, and that will be routed through the system. So that whole process will be visible once it's internalized into the platform.
Thank you so much. It looks like we've covered the questions that have been submitted. And I want to make sure I give the opportunity for either of you to share any final comments or remarks for the group based on the conversation we had today.
I just want to say thank you all for the time and attention today. And we're really excited about the future for learners of this type of software. So would love to hear from you if you want to come along on the journey.
Yep. Feel free to contact either of us, attain@sova.org, or if you have some other questions about the research in particular, zp@berkeley.edu.
Okay.
And they're asking for the QR code. So if you don't mind, I'll just quickly share my screen
And I'll put in our panelists chat. I don't know if this can go out to them, attain interest form.
What'd I do? Sorry, is that working?
Yeah,
Yes, we can see it. So we'll keep this up, but I just wanted to say thank you both, Laura and Zach, for taking the time to be a part of this webinar today, and to thank our attendees as well. And hopefully everyone has had enough time to scan the QR code. This will conclude our webinar today. Please enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you both again. Take care.
Thanks, Dr. Lee.